And here I thought the most ludicrous thing about this film was going to be Henry Cavill's haircut. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2024 spy action comedy, Argylle. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Argylle stars Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, and Henry Cavill, and was directed by Matthew Vaughn. It tells the story of introverted spy novelist Ellie Conway, who finds herself wrapped up in a real-life espionage plot after the storyline of her latest novel too closely mirrors real-world events. Every year, there's one film whose trailer seems to play ahead of every single movie you see. That one trailer you watch so many times that it embeds itself so deeply in your brain that you're convinced you've already seen the movie. Argylle was one of those films. But apart from having to see Henry Cavill's atrocious haircut on repeat, this was actually a trailer I didn't mind rewatching over and over again. Honestly, I was looking forward to this film, and it even made my 10 most anticipated movies of 2024 list. I'm a fan of spy movies and action comedies, and I tend to enjoy Matthew Vaughn's films, so if anybody was part of the target audience for this film, it was me. Argylle is a film that sucks you in with its premise. We've seen the basic idea of an author being pulled into an adventure like one of their books many times before, perhaps most notably in Romancing the Stone. But that aspect of the story is still fun here. It might not be all that fresh, but inserting that type of premise into an espionage story does offer a lot of enjoyable fish-out-of-water humor, and crowd-pleasing moments of fun. And this film is genuinely fun at times, but it's also one of the most tonally confused movies I've seen in a long time. At times, it's playfully absurd and intentionally cheesy. At other times, it feels like it's parodying some of the more prominent spy movie tropes with knowing self-awareness. But then at other times, it's oddly self-serious. Vaughn's spy comedies usually offer up some unconventional tonal blends, but this particular cocktail doesn't quite work, even when shaken and not stirred. As confused and all over the place as this film's tone is, nothing can quite prepare you for how unnecessarily elaborate the plot is. I am somebody who likes twists in movies. I like plot revelations and unexpected turns and surprising moments that recontextualize everything you've seen up to that point. Espionage films especially are known for having these types of twists up their sleeves. I mean, much of the marketing of Argylle was built around the idea of a twist, the mystery of who the real agent Argylle is. So I was ready for some twistiness. I wasn't ready, however, for the sheer number of twists that this film delivers. If you couldn't tell, that is not a compliment in this case. This movie gets tediously convoluted, and at a certain point, after a certain number of twists get thrown at us, it kind of just gets exhausting, and you really start to feel the extended runtime. I'm staying away from any and all spoilers in this review, but I have to say, even if you look past the ridiculous number of twists, the twists themselves aren't executed all that well. The film blatantly telegraphs everything, so I had much of the story figured out within the first 10 minutes of the movie. That in itself doesn't make the film any less enjoyable, but it does make the clearly meant to be shocking reveals later in the film exceptionally anticlimactic. If you've seen any of Matthew Vaughn's films, you know that he's got a very distinctive visual style, especially to his action sequences. There's always a certain degree of hyper-stylization, but Argylle takes that visual aesthetic and turns it up to 11. Once again, if you couldn't quite tell, that is not a compliment. It just bathes everything in this sheen of glossy artificiality. If the silly, overproduced style and poor CGI had been restricted to the book segments of the story, it could have worked as a clever way to differentiate the storylines. But it's applied to the whole movie, and it's just visually jarring and unappealing. There are certainly some moments that are entertaining thanks to the stylization, like some sequences with Alfie the cat, as well as a completely absurd scene involving oil, but there are far more moments that don't work because of this over-stylized artificiality. All in all, Argylle is just an odd mixed cat carrier bag of a movie. It's got its interesting and very fun, entertaining moments, but it's also incredibly frustrating and, frankly, baffling at other times. Obviously, you can't fault a film for not meeting your own expectations of it, but Argylle was a surprisingly underwhelming experience for me. It really feels like a movie that doesn't quite have a clear sense of its own identity, and is instead at odds with itself and its hopes for the audience. It's a movie that's super twisty and really wants you to think about its plot and marvel at its cleverness, but at the same time, it's the type of film you really need to just turn your brain off to fully enjoy. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro is definitely the premise. It's certainly a general concept we've seen before, but the fish out of water quality of putting an author into the action of one of their stories is undeniably fun. Combining that with an action spy comedy plot only adds to the enjoyment. This story admittedly gets off to a bit of a slow start, but it's fun once things get going, and the bones of this plot are pretty solid. It's just too bad that that promising structure and premise isn't enough to carry the film through to its end. On the con side, the biggest issue is that this movie is way too convoluted. At one point, I thought the overly complex but perfectly convenient plot and excessive number of twists were intended as self-aware parody of how elaborate spy thrillers can sometimes get, but then another 4 or 5 twists were thrown at us, and it no longer seemed like it was self-aware. Instead, it just felt like an overly convoluted and tonally confused story that didn't know when to say when. Twists are fun, but when they're so blatantly telegraphed and so numerous that they're exhausting, then you've got a problem. Con number 2 is the artificiality, specifically of the visual style. I am a fan of most of Matthew Vaughn's previous films, so I know that he usually employs this very slick, hyper-stylized visual aesthetic in his movies. It's over-the-top and CGI enhanced, but usually entertaining and fitting for the gonzo tone of his movies. But Argylle takes this over-stylization to the extreme, in a film that, at least at points, should feel slightly more grounded in something close to reality than most of his other films. Everything here is glossy and overproduced. This makes sense for some of the more outrageous action scenes, and is undeniably entertaining during several of those sequences, but the constant CGI enhancement and artificial sheen of this movie do more harm than good here. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Argylle or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Argylle 3 out of 5 paws. The artificial sheen of the CGI and stylization is nearly blinding, and the film has more twists than a retro phone cord, but this film still delivers a lot of fun if you can just sit back and embrace its cheesy oddity. I would recommend Argylle to fans of Matthew Vaughn's previous spy action comedies. If you enjoy his odd tonal mixes and hyper-stylization, there will probably be a lot you enjoy here too. Espionage fans will appreciate the tropes, many of which border on parody, but the deluge of twists will start to suffocate even the most ardent of fans. If you liked Argylle, I would recommend Romancing the Stone. This movie doesn't have the espionage elements of Argylle, but it was still a clear inspiration for the film, focusing on an adventure romance novelist who finds herself living out the plot of one of her books as she searches for her sister and treasure in a jungle. If you want another more modern and comedic take on this premise, you'll want to check out The Lost City. It's another cheesy but fun fish-out-of-water adventure comedy, starring Sandra Bullock as an author who suddenly finds herself wrapped up in a real-life adventure befitting of her popular book series. And if you like some espionage, you should watch Kingsman: The Golden Circle. All of the Kingsman films have some similar qualities, but this sequel is the closest to matching the weirdly offbeat and hyper-stylized insanity of Matthew Vaughn's latest action spy comedy. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Argylle? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, who's your favorite movie cat? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information on this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or on it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.